Welcome to the Butterfly Effect, brought to you by Moss Adams. I'm Chris Horner, and this is stage 17 of the Tour de France. 178 kilometers, about 110 miles in length. 3 massive climbs at the finish of today's stage. The first part, about 115 kilometers of more or less flat roads, but they're going to have a block headwind. So a breakaway of 6 riders will get out early without much effort. Now, when those 6 riders went and the gap started getting up to 8 minutes, we're getting a little worried back there that might be the group that's playing for the stage win. But it's Israel Startup Nation along with Archaic Samsic. Archaic Samsic have only 3 riders in the race still left. The other 5 have dropped out for multiple different reasons. But one of the 3 riders in, Nairo Quintana, is still fighting for the KOM jersey up the road. So they have 3 riders left, but they're going to put one on the front. Tactically, this is brilliant. They got nothing else to play for, and Nairo Quintana is their guy. So they throw a guy on there, Israel Startup Nation throw a guy, and UAE Team Emirates have a guy on the front. UAE Team Emirates were just riding 1 rider, but with the help of the other 2, you know you're going to stabilize that gap at 8 to 9 minutes that they have. Now, when the climb starts proper, we're talking 65 kilometers from the first climb starting all the way to the finish on the Col de Porte. The Col de Porte, 16 kilometers long at almost 9%. It's an absolute monster. The real 8 kilometers last part of this climb is barely a road, if you want to call it that. Now, with the 3 teams riding on the back, they're going to hold that breakaway at a stable gap. And when you look at a stage like today, you know those guys because only Anthony Perez in the break of 6 is really known for being somewhat decent in the climbs. The rest of the guys, one will surprise us with Dorian Godin, but the other guys are not climbers in any way. So you know with such a monster climb left, like the Porte, that they're going to need at least 12, 15-minute gap in order to stay off on the stage. The guys behind, the 3 teams chasing, Archaic Samsic, Israel Startup Nation, and UAE Team Emirates are doing a great job of keeping that gap stable. When the first climb starts to Parasord, it's 65 kilometers to go. This climb, 13 kilometers at about 7%, and Archaic Samsic got Plan B going in effect. They already rode their first rider throughout the first half of the flat section of this stage, and now they put the other 1/3 of their team on the front. Elie Jalsberg, who tacks, Nairo Quintana follows with them. Wout Poels jumps along. Wout Poels, Nairo Quintana, they're going for the Mountain Points jersey, and so they got it set up. Elie Jalsberg is throwing down some effort. Then we start seeing UAE Team Emirates' real plan. Now, they've already been riding 1 guy throughout the flat part of this stage. Now you start seeing when Nairo Quintana's group cannot gain any more than 30 seconds on the GC field behind, you start realizing UAE Team Emirates are looking for a mountain stage win. Tadej Pogacar already won a TT at stage 5, but he's missing that mountain stage victory, and now we know when we're watching from the couch that this is going to be a battle royale back there amongst the GC favorites. Nairo Quintana won't gain any time and eventually will get brought back from the UAE-led squad behind. They go over the Parasord. They start the second categorized climb on today's stage, and Brandon McNulty back there is doing a great job when they summit the second KOM on today's stage. They'll go down the backside, and Sepp Kuss, with about 23 kilometers to go in a right turn, will be too wide and get pinched off, and he's off in the grass, but manages to save it and gets back on the road. Doesn't lose any time. It was a great save. He's back there in safe position, and UAE Team Emirates are doing damage to the time gap of the front leaders. When they start the last climb, it's a 2-rider break up the front with Anthony Perez and Dorian Godin. They're doing a great job. Perez will attack Dorian with about 2 kilometers into the stage, and he'll try to go solo. Now, he's been holding that gap at around 4 minutes the whole time they've been into the mountains proper, and on the last stage, this thing's a monster. UAE Team Emirates behind are doing a fabulous job. Davide Formulo is on the front for UAE Team Emirates, followed by the American Brandon McNulty, Rafael Majka, and then Tadej Pogacar. Behind them, Jonas Vingegaard and Sepp Kuss are right on the wheel of the UAE Team Emirates. They'll ride that way until Brandon McNulty will take over about 2 kilometers into the climb. At 11.5 kilometers to go, Rafael Micah will take over for Brandon McNulty, as McNulty's done a fabulous job on today's stage, leading over the second categorized climb, doing parts of the descents and just driving it up the last climb, the Col de Porte. When Rafael Micah takes over, there's a little bit of interesting tactics there. UAE team members, Jonathan Castroviejo tries to take over the front and set a faster pace. Rafael Micah's having none of it, and he jumps back over the top of Jonathan Castroviejo and continues his work on the front. About 9-10 kilometers to go. Pello Bilbao will do an attack and get up the road. Rafael Micah, though, he's got a plan. UAE team Emirates, they're trying to win with Tadej Pogačar for certain. Rafael Micah picks up the pace with about 8.5 kilometers to go. Rafael Micah does his biggest acceleration he can, swings off right, and you just see him take a big breath trying to recover from the effort as they absorb Pello Bilbao back with the GC favorites. It's Tadej Pogačar time, and he starts accelerating right after 8.5 kilometers to go. Does a big acceleration. Ben O'Connor manages to stay with the first acceleration. Surprisingly, he's riding absolutely fantastic. But then Pogačar does another acceleration, and now we're starting to get into the GC favorites. Jonathan Castroviejo, who had done an amazing job on the first acceleration that Tadej Pogačar did, bringing Richard Carapaz with him and closing the gap. The second acceleration, Jonathan Castroviejo again will tow Carapaz up and close the gap for him. Jonas Vingegaard is looking fantastic. The third acceleration from Tadej Pogačar causes a split. Jonas Vingegaard could go with him. Behind, it's Rigoberto Urán that's opening up the gap. Richard Carapaz's fourth wheel as the gap is splitting between the two groups. Rigoberto Urán does a great job to get close to closing the gap, and then Carapaz will jump from behind and close the gap to make it 3 riders up front. Rigoberto Urán will have a hard 7 kilometers to the finish. Luckily for the EF Education riders, Sergio Higuita back there will come back up to Rigoberto Urán's wheel and pace him all the way to the finish on today's stage. Up front, the 3 leaders are throwing in attacks. Vingegaard and Pogačar are trading blows. It's fantastic viewing. You got to watch it live. Those two are going back and forth. Carapaz looks like he's on the limit and not taking any pulls. We'll see Jonas Vingegaard look back and argue a little bit with Carapaz, but Carapaz is not moving. Now, many times when I've been in this situation up the road, remember the directors behind have a TV in the car, so they're watching the car. It could be Tadej Pogačar and Jonas Vingegaard could be getting messages relayed by the radio at this point in time that the directors could say, hey, Carapaz looks good or Carapaz looks really bad. When I'm watching it, Carapaz looks like he's at the limit. Every acceleration and attack from the 2 riders up front, he's fighting to close the gap. He does close it and never once takes a pull. At about 4.5 kilometers to go, Tadej Pogačar goes back to Richard Carapaz and starts waving his hand by. He wants him to come take a pull, but Richard Carapaz is like, no way. With 1.4 kilometers to go, Richard Carapaz throws in his attack. He'd been sitting on the whole climb. The 2 leaders in front of him, Jonas Vingegaard and Tadej Pogačar, had been doing all the work since 8.5 kilometers to go. Carapaz had been sitting on and had been racing perfectly. At 1.4 kilometers with his acceleration, Vingegaard gets dropped off the back. Tadej Pogačar locks on solid to Carapaz's wheel. They'll go through the tunnel. When they come out the other side, Vingegaard is 8-10 seconds behind and doing everything he can to claw back to the 2 leaders. Up front, Richard Carapaz is driving to the line trying to put time on Vingegaard. With about 250 meters to go, Jonas Vingegaard has clawed his way back to the 2 leaders, and with 75 meters to go, Tadej Pogačar will put in an acceleration that allow him to solo to the line. It's pretty funny, right? 75 meters to go, and I'm talking about solo into the line, but he'll put gaps on Jonas Vingegaard, who end up getting second on the stage. Carapaz dropped and lost a few more seconds to come through for third. Now, in my mind, Ineos were perfect on today's stage all the way up to 1.4K to go. Jonathan Castroviejo, the gaps that he closed back up to Tadej Pogacar with Richard Carapaz sitting on his wheel from 8.5 to 7.5K to go were brilliant and amazing team tactics. That Domestique absolutely did amazing things to save Richard Carapaz's legs. The problem is, at 1.4 kilometers to go, that's 1,400 meters that Richard Carapaz has to pull Tadej Pogacar to the line. There's no way you're going to win with Tadej Pogacar glued to your wheel. Now, I don't mind the attack at 1.4K to go because maybe he can get the gap. But once Tadej Pogacar locks onto your wheel and they come out of the tunnel, Carapaz has to sit up and try to win the stage. You're no longer worried about 10 seconds on Jonas Vingegaard for the stage. It's more important to win the stage and get the time bonuses. Instead, Richard Carapaz is just drilling it as hard as he can. Tadej Pogacar sitting on his wheel until 75 meters to go, launches and wins in spectacular style, and Ineos lose the stage and finish third on the stage. Absolutely brilliant. But always what I like to talk about on the butterfly effect, I always say at the beginning of the races, you can make mistakes all over the places and find ways to solve those mistakes. In the middle of the stage, they become more important. At the end of the stage, they become really important. And when you're talking 1.4 kilometers to go, everything has to be perfect. His first attack, no problem. You can even recover from that. But as soon as he realizes that Tadej Pogacar is glued to his wheel and he has to pull him all the way to the line, he's got to sit up and start playing a tactical game again. Instead, pulls it all the way to the line. He blows up and gets third and loses time to both the riders and gives away the stage win to Tadej Pogacar, who won in spectacular style. Hope you guys like my take on Ineos today on the butterfly effect. Tadej Pogacar was brilliant. Jonas Vingegaard survived today's stage in spectacular style for second on the stage. Richard Carapaz, you gave away a beautiful chance at today's stage. Davide Gaudu, the FDJ rider who finished fourth on the stage. Fantastic ride back there from Davide Gaudu. Congratulations, FDJ. Like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys real soon on tomorrow's stage 18 of the Tour de France.